Good morning, everybody. Morning. Thank you for the irrevocable gift of your time this morning, and for coming out to learn a little bit about EXIM and contribute to the discussion, because we're mainly in learning mode. And I want to give a little bit of a background on what brings us here, and then turn it over to some other smart people, and most importantly, turn it over to you all. And but first of all, I want to say thank you to Dickinson for hosting us. Thank you to KMM for hosting us. We've had a wonderful tour, and it was interesting. Just to give a little history, I don't know, time is so deceiving, you guys, but a couple of years ago when Kimberly Reed, then the president of the EXIM Bank, called and said, I want to come to North Dakota and see what y'all got going on there and do a little roundtable, and what do you think? And I said, well, of course, I'd love to have you. And so we put together a nice shindig in Fargo, and went down to Wapton to tour a plant, much like we did here. And it was kind of a big to-do. Well, then, when Director Bacchus called, I said, let's do something completely different. Let's go to the western edge. Let's tour not a direct exporter, but a subcontractor, and let's demonstrate how EXIM works in the entire supply chain. And so here we are. And of course, in fact, Rachel could attest, when we had the meeting to talk about what do you want to do with it, we had a fairly short time frame. I said, it didn't take me 30 seconds to say, let's go to Killdeer manufacturing, didn't I? Is that it? Yeah, it's the first words out of my mouth. And the reason being, because even back before I was in Congress, Kristen and her family were advocates for Export-Import Bank as a tool, a financing tool, to help one of their largest partners, of course, Boeing. That's all relevant to the discussion for this reason. You know, I stumble around in politics, and mostly failures, but hung in there long enough to see a success. In fact, Steve, when I write my memoirs, there'll be a chapter about you, and it's already basically written in my brain. But all these decades later, not only do I find myself in Congress, but I find out it's not as easy as I thought, right? And I was in the House. Now, Spence he'd already abandoned the House when I got there, so we just I think we sort of shook hands on the way in and out. And I was got on the Energy and Commerce Committee, but not on the Finance Committee or Ways and Means or any of the real heady stuff. But this much I knew for sure, that in a little place like North Dakota, in this center of the North American continent, if we had to eat everything we produce, we'd be in a lot of trouble. We'd be very fat, and our farmers would not be very successful. And then I find myself, and prior to that, of course, at one point, Ed Schaefer says, we're going to change you from tourism director to economic development and finance director, to which I said, what I know about banking, you could tap into a small thimble. And he said, that's okay, we need a promoter. And I said, well, that I can do, but please don't ask me to talk much about finance. Right? Sherry can attest. Yeah, he was dumber in the post. Right, Robert? I know Robert's thinking, that was the dumbest idea Ed ever had. Anyway, so, but that's what I was. I was a promoter. So what I didn't know about finance, I figured out that it was important. Right? There's some deals that are bankable, Todd, right? Some deals that need the Bank of North Dakota. Some deals that need maybe a federal, program. Not that they were bad deals. They just didn't fit the bankable mold. And so this is where the aggregated generosity of the American taxpayer comes in. So our world's getting to be larger in population, but seemingly smaller in size. And so I learned about this little thing called the Export-Import Bank. So I go back, I'm in the House of Representatives. We have some pretty strong leadership that doesn't like the Export-Import Bank, and they let it lapse. And when I say lapse, I mean the authorization literally lapsed, right? And now remember, and this is going to be I'll just be as raw as I can be, okay? So forgive me, we're all family. So most of the leadership to oppose the Export-Import Bank, of course, are Republican. and other conservative organizations and stakeholder groups. And we're in the majority. And we have a farm bill, and we have all these things that require authorization. And the Export-Import Bank lapses because the chair of the Banking Committee or Financial Services Committee allowed that to happen on purpose. So the only way to bring a bill up that would reauthorize it when you don't have the support of leadership in the House, unlike North Dakota, not every bill gets a hearing, much less a vote. And so is for 218 of your closest friends to come together and say, we're going to force this to the floor. That's called a petition. So you literally have to petition the floor, the leadership, to force the bill to come to the floor. And it's called discharge. Now, since we were in the majority, obviously there weren't enough Democrats to bring it to the floor, because 218 is one more than half. That's what's tough about being the only member of the House of Representatives in a body of 435 people. And so we started a discharge petition, and we needed 40 Republicans to sign the petition, and then every Democrat would sign it, and we'd have a vote which would no doubt pass overwhelmingly. That's the other thing. You know, one of the reasons you don't bring a bill to the floor is to protect us from ourselves. That's what leaders think sometimes. And so I was the 40th Republican. You needed 40 of them. I was the 40th Republican to sign it, and we bring it to the floor, and we discharge the petition, and we do a 5-year extension. Well, that extension came up again when I find myself in the Senate. This time I'm on the Banking Committee. Now, I sit at the kids' table on the Banking Committee, but nonetheless, you know, I'm one of the cool kids. And so I'm sitting on the end of the table, and straight across from me is a House classmate and Senate classmate of mine, Kirsten Sinema. And she's sitting on the kids' table on the Democratic side. And we knew we had to reauthorize. And by that point, not only, even if you had authorization, there wasn't a quorum on the board. Because that's the other thing. If you had a president that didn't care a lot about it, and neither Barack Obama nor Donald Trump really cared a lot about the Export-Import Bank. So they just stop appointing directors, and you can't do business. So there's a lot going on at this time. Okay, so fast forward, Donald Trump becomes president, I become a senator, I'm on the Banking Committee, and Kirsten and I figured, let's really do something big, and we propose a bill to extend the Export-Import Bank's authority for 10 years, which is twice as what it's ever been done before. But we had a number 2 Republican on the committee. We had another former chairman on the committee, who also is the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, who don't like the Export-Import Bank. In other words, we were never going to have a hearing on the Export-Import Bank. Except the Senate has this weird tradition of big bills at the end of the year that need to be passed. And if you can attach something to that, it's like Christmas, right? So that's why they call it Christmas trees. We hate it, right? As citizens, as taxpayers, as voters, we watch from the outside and go, this is the worst system in the history of the world. Except you still have to get some friends on board. And so one day, realizing this was never going to happen, I called Donald Trump, who never liked the Export-Import Bank, but I worked on him for, literally, you guys, for 3 years. Or at least 2 at that point. And he said to me, you know, let me call the chairman and see if we can't get this on. He said, you know, I didn't used to like the Export-Import Bank, and then I thought, well, this is good for GE and Boeing. But he said, you know what I've learned, Kevin? It's good for the small manufacturers. They use it as much or more than anybody, including all of those in the supply chain. And I pretended like I'd never told him any of that stuff before. I said, you're right, Mr. President. you're brilliant. And lo and behold, we did not get it for 10 years, right, Spencer? We got it for 7, which was still historic. Okay, I'm a believer. I'm an old economic development director that didn't know much about finance, but I knew we didn't have enough, and we needed to use all the tools at our disposal. And there are 85 other countries that have export credit agencies. 85 competitors that had a tool that we, at the time, did not have. Now, that's a competitive disadvantage. We're the greatest country in the world, the most productive country in the world, the biggest consumer country in the world. You ought to have at least modest tools that can play at the same level as other countries. So that's why I care so much about it, and I'm so grateful that Spencer called as a director, and that they've noticed that North Dakota is a player, and they took the time to take all of the legs of a long airplane ride to get to Dickinson on a Monday, which was to accommodate my schedule, not his. But he did all of that to be here with us. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this time is right now I want to turn it over to the mayor to say welcome to all of us. And then I want to turn it over to Kristen to say welcome to all of us. And then I'm going to turn it over to Spencer to give us the latest and greatest. And then we're going to turn it over to you all to bring us your stories, ask your questions, enlighten us, and we'll just have a good family discussion. So with that, Mr. Mayor, thank you for welcoming us.
Well, thank you, Senator Kramer, and welcome to Director Bacchus to our great city, and thank you, Kristen and KMM, for hosting this event. Just like to welcome everybody. Anyone not from Dickinson, please mingle with many of our great producers here in town. They have a great story, every one of them, from Baker Boyd to TMI to Steffes to KMM, Stone Mill. We have this great manufacturing community out here in the Western Edge, and besides the oil, we have this great ag base out here. We're such a diverse community, and we're just trying to get that message out to the world, what Dickinson can bring to the table. We're so happy that Director Bacchus could bring the EXIM here to have a discussion amongst our community members and from other members within the state. This is just a great event, and thank you so much for bringing it to Dickinson, Senator.
Thank you,
Director Bacchus.
Thanks, Scott, for your hospitality. I think I'm mixing up the schedule a little bit because I do want Kristen. I want Kristen to talk next because I want her to, of course, it's her facility. She's the landlord, but tell their story a little bit, and then turn it over to Spencer.
Well, I definitely appreciate and very thankful for everybody's presence here today, and just really want to thank you, Senator and Director Bacchus, for seeing firsthand the quality work and the opportunity that Export-Import Bank and those loans issued to emerging airlines and emerging and developing nations provide right here in our nation's heartland and here in Dickinson. So it's amazing because it is sometimes frustrating when people just call it, oh, it's the Boeing Bank and it only benefits these larger customers, because in reality it really does drill down to the supply chain, and it really creates a lot of opportunity here for growth, continued growth, and it develops new relations with other countries. So just very thankful to have this discussion, grateful to give you a tour, and also just very thankful. I think one thing that's also very unique about North Dakota is we have such wonderful working relationships with our members of the United States Senate and Congress, and so it's really nice to be able to have that personal touch, and just grateful to have you here today, and look forward to this discussion. So thanks for being here, everyone.
Thanks, Kristen. With regard to the relationship piece, you guys, I loved being in the House, Spencer, I really did, but really, when you're the only one from an entire state and 434 of your colleagues come from somewhere else, I used to say, to get to 218, all I need is Montana, Wyoming, Alaska, and South Dakota, and there'd be 5 of us. In other words, you make a lot. You have to do a lot. There's a lot of horse trading in the House. But the great thing about the Senate is that everybody gets 2, and this relationship, right? This is special, you guys. If you ever doubt the importance of our electoral college and the three branches and the bicameral legislature, this is an example of why it matters that we have these opportunities. Because as much as Kirsten Gillibrand might like to do this with all of her communities in New York, or as much as Ted Cruz might want to host one of these in every community in Texas, they don't get to, but I get to, and I get to swing by Dale's office and have coffee because he's in town. You know what I'm saying? And that's special. So with that, you've already figured out he served in the House from Alabama. He was both ranking member and chairman of the Financial Services Committee. He retired just in time, and and now gets to use his skills in lots of ways, and his Rolodex and his background in lots of ways. But we're especially grateful that you accepted the administration's appointment to the EXIM Bank to bring that experience there. The experience both of the bureaucracy and the legislative process, as well as business and being a stakeholder advocate. And we're really, really grateful that you got up really early in Mobile to be in Dickinson this morning. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Well, the reason I came here, ultimately, I did two things. I wanted to see Killdeer Manufacturing because to see these businesses in a place like Dickinson, which really make a critical difference in the community, and financially, educationally, culturally, and every business that EXIM supports is a unique story. And it's about, American entrepreneurship. It really is. It's about Kristen's grandfather. She explained the route he took, and now you've got a real treasure here. You've also got a viable, financially stable company here, partially because of your Senator Kramer. And I'm not, that may sound like, wow, that's quite a reach. It really isn't. Killdeer depends on Boeing. And what do you hear about Boeing if you read the national publications? Bank of Boeing. You ever heard that? We're the Bank of Boeing. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and a few on our side too. When you get to the extremes, it kind of reaches around, and there's some similarities. But Elizabeth Warren says, we're just there for Boeing. Bernie Sanders says, we're here to subsidize Wall Street. Kristen, I don't think you're Wall Street. And your main customer is Boeing. So we're the Bank of Killdeer Manufacturing. And I had we wouldn't be authorized if it weren't for Senator Kramer, one or two other courageous Republicans. And let me tell you, we had a lot of Republicans that supported the bank, but they didn't want to step out and cross some of their big money supporters. The Club for Growth said, we're against it because the Koch brothers 40 years ago, one of their competitors got a grant from EXIM, and they've held it against them ever since. He mentioned the appropriations chairman, which he had to horse trade with. He had to give him, they had to horse trade, you get this, you get that. He has Airbus in his district. And he doesn't like the fact that we subsidize Boeing. He kind of overlooks the fact that the French and the Europeans and the English, they subsidize a little over twice as much subsidies for Airbus. And just to tell you the importance of having an EXIM, a functioning EXIM, which Senator Kramer was really key. When we were shut down in 2015, I wasn't on the board. Boeing lost, they had 60% of the business. When we opened back up in late, 2017? Boeing had 35% of the orders that year. And let me tell you something. when it comes to market share, any of y'all know in business, it's easier to hold your market share than it is to capture market share. Once the Chinese or Airbus start selling airplanes to a airline in Romania where they were buying Boeing, you know, Airbus has got a leg up. And you know, it's sad, in South America alone, we lost 40% of our exports in 2 years in the whole continent. Why did we lose it? Well, one reason is because we quote corporate subsidies. Well, look, that's the world we operate in. You know, our competition, if we don't try to level, and it's about leveling the playing field. I mean, can you imagine when the Chinese give 6 or 8% of just whatever a company wants, how that tilts the playing field? America, we're still known in the world. One thing that we have not lost, and this is our silver bullet. People still know we produce quality. We're quality. We're not cost. I don't know that we'll ever be at cost. And companies that have bought a Chinese part instead of an American part because it was 30% cheaper, and the American part lasted 10 years, and all of a sudden 2 years later, the Chinese parts quit working. Or the Chinese signed they do this a lot. We'll build something and then we'll sign a maintenance agreement. And they find out that maintenance agreement cost them dearly. They don't really care about the front end, how much they do a little bit, but they sell to own. They end up owning. They own 6 or 8 ports in other countries. In Sri Lanka, they bankrupted Sri Lanka.
They sure did.
They bankrupted them. And the Sri Lankan government has to give 72 hours notice if they want to go on the port. And you know how many Sri Lankans work at the port? Just the lowest menial labor. And I say that they're grateful for the jobs and it keeps them from starvation, and there's no meaningful. But I'm talking about just the worst of the most hazardous work. They're all Chinese workers. They come in to build a road in Jamaica. They bring prisoners in, and the prisoners are building the road, and the prisoners were stealing the chickens from the farmers along the road. And when they started stealing the goats, that was like stealing your wife in Jamaica. And they kicked them out, told them no more, we're missing too many goats. But, you know, countries, they're faced with this. China says, we'll just give you this, this is too good a deal. And the Chinese can do things we can't do. We function on top of the table. They function under the table, on top of the table. And it may surprise you, but there's a lot of corruption in foreign countries. Yeah. You know, there's some here. But the scale of it in other places, it's just for sale. And it's almost impossible for us to compete if we can't offer anything. I was chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, a ranking member, for 6 years. And they kept this Bank of Boeing stuff up, and then some of the Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth were doing the corporate subsidy stuff. And between them, we held them off. And I retired January of 2015. the new chairman that came in was, his main funder was people that wanted EXIM out of the way. And he told me in a conversation about 3 years before, when I was telling him, what is this stuff with EXIM? I mean, I've got local companies, small companies that built their business on EXIM, on their short-term insurance guarantees. And he said, look, this is actually word for word. I've shared this with Senator Kramer. He said, look, as long as we can buy something from China for 1 penny less than we can buy it from here, that's capitalism. Well, it may be the most extreme example of capitalism, but there's a downside. And the good news is that after COVID and after, all these supply problems, where we couldn't get Tylenol, we could get Tylenol for 2 cents less than we could get, a bottle of Tylenol. We could get it for $1 less than we could get it overseas. Or ibuprofen. When we found out we couldn't get it, period, it was a problem. Now, it's a bigger problem when we find that we cannot build a fighter jet in the United States without depending on enemies of America. And I'm 73 years old. All my uncles, they fought World War II. My father. We manufactured Germany and Japan out of business. The last year of the war, we were producing 6 times as many airplanes as Japan and Germany put together. We can't do that today. It scares me. And it's a national security problem. And let me tell you, Killdeer is defending America. Whatever else those folks are doing out there, they are securing our national security. I went to Gulfstream in Savannah, and they're not Boeing. And the first thing they asked me? They said, we sure hope y'all keep supporting Boeing. And I said, why is that? And I had a pretty good idea already. And they said, because our suppliers are Boeing suppliers. And almost every company, that we rely on for parts for Gulfstream, and that's the largest private jet company in the world. And we support about 20% of their business. And their most profitable business, because Saudi Arabian princes, they just don't ask about price. They're more concerned with what the lavatory looks like in the jet. So it's their most profitable business. And they have 82 color schemes. And I thought, well, maybe I'll buy Senator Kramer a Gulfstream. So I said, what's your smallest jet? What's it cost? They said $66 million.
I wouldn't want the smallest one anyways.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have worked.
$66 million. They said, if Boeing is in trouble, we're in trouble, because all our producers are in trouble. And the best parts we get, we have to rely on foreign parts. And I learned from Kristen, one great thing about getting out of Birmingham, where I'm from, or Alabama, is I learned things I didn't know. And she told me that what they produce for Boeing, Mexico and China and Morocco also produce some of those same parts. And she told me something I've heard. If I've heard it once, I have heard it 25 times. I've heard it from Boeing. I've heard it from other subcontractors. They say they like domestically produced parts because they're quality. And you know, they've had some trouble with their latest, the 777, is it the 777 that has trouble?
737.
The Dreamliner or 7?
The 37 Max.
Yeah, Max. Well, you know, some of those parts came from overseas. And that was the Achilles heel. Cost them. We went out of, you know, we couldn't support them. They had a problem with, we could, you know, and we've had some suppliers that went out of business because they, and a lot of our folks supply Airbus. But it's hard to do because they'll pay a little more for a European part. But what you need to know, I guess, as much as anything else, there'll be a time when people from outside will come in and they'll run an ad against your senator or your congressman. And they'll say, he supports EXIM. They may not even say that. They may pick something. They probably will pick something totally different that they said he did. But probably behind it, as much as anything, is he supports EXIM. And he supports local, buy it local. And let me tell you, there's still, Koch brothers is not shut down in Russia. They're the biggest funder of Club for Growth. They said, we're not shutting down. They're still making parts. But people will come in and they'll run an ad against your senator and they'll talk about Bank of Boeing. And you need to say to them, Bank of Killdeer Manufacturing. Like the people in Vermeer in Iowa who make the farm equipment, they came in and they were criticizing one of their congressmen who supported them. And the people at Vermeer said, EXIM is the Bank of Vermeer. Don't tell us that they're the Bank of Boeing. They don't produce anything for Boeing. They produce agricultural equipment. But we've got, Senator Kramer knows this, I met with the premier of China three back. And I actually I and two other congressmen, our wife spent an hour alone with him. We were there building a school with UPS, and it was on CCTV. And at that time, he actually said, and I believe him, he talked about moving towards capitalism. He talked about moving towards our model. They were actually at one time committed to becoming more capitalistic and to have a good relationship. This latest guy, he's nothing like what we had before. I mean, the one I talked to, the guy I talked to who talked to my wife about how wonderful teachers are, he said, you know, he said what we'd say. We're so much in common. Teachers are the key. Education is the key to our country. He talked about a teacher that if he wouldn't be premier today, if this one teacher hadn't have taken him and had an interest in him. And my wife was a high school teacher. And they talked for 30 minutes. We've got a different guy in Russia now. I mean, we've got the same guy. But hadn't we realized that China and Russia are not there to build a friendship with us? I mean, hadn't we realized that? And if we can't manufacture weapons, we build passenger aircraft, you can convert those to tankers, you can convert those to military. We're actually restricted from supporting military exports. We're the only ECA of the 86 that has that restriction. They've tied our hands on this and that and all sorts of stuff. And we were going to do something with Ukraine with weather radar. And somebody said, one of our enemies said, wait a minute, you could use those to track aircraft. And I thought to myself, you figured it out. They were right. But we could not export that radar system 3 years ago to Ukraine, or 2 years ago. You know, we started, they wanted it, they came to us in 2015. We were shut down to 17. We started talking to them. And let me tell you, legitimately, it's the same radar that checks tornadoes that plots trains. I mean, you can, it's multifunctional. But they don't have it because somebody said, you can't do that, EXIM. So I've said enough. I don't, if we're going to ask questions, I was, at the end of Vietnam, I was a medic. And I went in about a year before the war was over. And I was in the second class that went to Fort Sam for a year to train as a medic and didn't go. The class right before us didn't go. Every other class every month went. And we used surplus helicopters from Vietnam. And the reason we were told we did is these were broken down old helicopters that made too much noise. And so they made a lot of terrible whining noise and whistles, and when you were on them for 30 minutes, you couldn't talk to each other. So when I tested out of the military, I'd lost 40% of my hearing. So
talk loudly when we ask a question. Is that
yeah,
what you're saying?
so I've suffered from hearing loss since I was 21 years old because of also refusal to wear earplugs because real men didn't wear earplugs.
All right, here's what I want to do then. There's a number of things that cross my mind. There's three areas I want to explore. One, current users, current customers, and we have some. How to bank it. Because one of the things I don't think we've said yet is, well, I referenced it a little bit, Todd, when I referenced you, and that is EXIM is like the Bank of North Dakota in the sense that generally they work with a cooperative bank, a collaborating bank. They don't start the deal, right? And so, and we have some banks that maybe have done some export stuff, maybe some that don't. Maybe talk a little bit about export North Dakota and what other opportunities might exist for others who've seen the opportunity but haven't taken the dive, okay? So Sherry, I'm looking at you, I didn't tell you up front, but you're a current customer and in your company. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience, what you do and why this matters? I'm assuming it's a good answer, so I know it is.
You're right with that. So Leonardite Products is a mining and processing facility based out of Williston. And the product that Leonardite that we mine it's rare throughout the world. So about 50% of our product is exported. And we have the same customers one after another. But we recently, and the product is used as a fertilizer additive, but also as an oil drilling mud or drilling liquid additive. So we do sell, we started selling to Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and we have repeat customers. And because of the problems with the supply chain and the expense of exporting, it's quadrupled in the last 2 years. A lot of our customers can't really afford to pay us up front and then pay for shipping at the same time. So we've had to make some allowances. And we're a small company, 20 employees. We can't really go without cash for a long time. So we, even though we're confident that our customers will pay us, we are customers of EXIM because we consider it insurance, an insurance policy, so that should there be any political unrest throughout the world, we'd be able to get our money if we needed it.
What kind of unrest could there possibly be doing business with Saudi Arabia and Egypt? I can't imagine why that would be.
And those are just some of the companies
Yeah,
we deal with.
yeah.
We deal with other small companies in Northern Africa and
Well, you
the
do.
Middle East.
We actually have some problems with Saudi Arabia.
Of course, yeah.
Because you'll have a prince over there that he pretty much does what he wants to. And their first response sometimes is, we're not gonna pay that much.
Yeah.
Well,
And
when you,
we work, one thing we do to help you, Sheree, is Sheree?
Sherry.
Shay?
I'll answer either.
Shay? We talk to our embassies.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and
Some-
our customer is Aramco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
very careful about that. But
And
with
that, probably on that scale, but it's amazing. Now, what we do, Dennis Griffin, stand up, Dennis. Dennis was the regional coordinator here, and he's been to Bozeman, he's been Fargo by far, is around Fargo. He's worked with companies up there. You've got a concentration of EXIM companies there. But we now have, we work through insurance brokers too. Most of our insurance, short-term insurance, we work through brokers. And so his new job, he is no longer regional director. We're training somebody else there. He is one of our he is in charge of broker management. Because the bank is down to 370 employees. We need 500. When we did the Marshall Plan, we did the Marshall Plan. Everything was bought in the Marshall Plan. They had 2,800 employees. But we don't need that. Of course, if you ever heard of federal agency that didn't need more?
Yeah, right.
But let me pause and tell you this. We're unlike any other federal agency. Let me tell you, I've walked through some federal agencies. I'll just stop there.
I hate most of them.
But our main concentration is engineers, engineering degrees. Our second concentration is accountants. You would have thought lawyers, wouldn't you? You would have thought maybe, no. Our main occupation there, our most, I think, 50-something of our employees are engineers, mechanical, structural, environmental, And you mentioned oil and gas, and I'm sorry, I'm hitting differently. When we were shut down, exports out of Houston dropped 40%.
Yeah, wow.
When I got on the board, the first 3 companies that urgently wanted to talk to me, one was the Port of Houston and 2 were Houston. They were oil and gas, because we export a lot of oil and gas stuff. And, we are still committed. I am. And I think the board is. We're committed. Look what's happened recently. We're committed to energy. We're committed to domestic energy. And we can do it right. We're under no illusions. And there are people that are, but that's why we need people that aren't, like your senator.
Okay, so here, we do it better than anybody. But Sherry really raised, I think, an interesting point, and that is there's an expertise that you're renting when you're doing business with EXIM. So, Ms. Kim, I know I'm putting everybody on the spot because I talked to none of you before this, but maybe you could help us understand, for anybody in the room who's a manufacturer, producer of something, or in a supply chain somewhere that hasn't exported, maybe you could share a little bit about the potential, the opportunity that EXIM provides, and your shop, and along with the commercial service and others. There's a lot of resources.
Sure. Hi, my name is Chiwon Kim in North Dakota Trade Office. So as some of you know, we have many companies under our arms that we are assisting their exporting business. And many of the companies, when they are exporting, they always ask us, how can I secure my payment?
Mm-hmm.
So we have talked to Dennis many times, and we connected them to Dennis. So we always introduce, hey, there is EXIM Bank, export credit insurance. So that is not only, as Sherry mentioned, not ensuring your payment, but also that is account receivable management. So it would be a great tool when you work with EXIM Bank, taking export credit insurance that will also allow you to manage your account receivables. And that, with that, many companies very, feel ease, and also even they approach it by a new customers, they feel, less risk. Of course, there is a risk when you are doing business with the new customers, but Exit Bank's, services and programs that will open a new business with the new customers that you haven't met or haven't talked. But that will also, lead them as a second or third as a long-term, buyers and even future partners. So that's what we trade office we do. And thank you again, Dennis, for your help.
One thing that we have got that a lot of people don't realize because it's new, but we have what's called supply chain working capital. And listen, a lot of our companies were under stress, the last 2 or 3 years, and their subcontractors were hesitant to do business with them because, they couldn't pay till they delivered the product. And we now have a program where we will, you bring something and you say, I've got a contract, if I get this contract, if I win this contract, I supply 400 harvesters to Ukraine. Now, I got a problem with the bank saying Ukraine isn't safe. We can now go back into Ukraine and we can check out how legit. We'll take a risk on Ukraine. We're, as we know, we're on the Ukrainian side of this deal, and but it doesn't have to be that. It can be a peanut guy that suddenly he gets a call from a country in South America, and they want so many peanuts, and it's about 8 times more than he can produce. So he wants to go out, and which he did, and he went out and bought peanuts from different suppliers and farmers, and he used our working capital, because if he'd gone to, now a bank participated. So we had a bank that was part of the deal, and they actually administered, but we guaranteed most of it. The bank had a small piece because the bank couldn't have taken on. They go to the regulators and they say, hey, we're going to do this deal. It's 20% of our loan, buying peanuts. They're going to, and that happened in aviation. A lot of banks that were trying to help Boeing, the regulator said you've got too much of a concentration, and their credit rating has gone down. Now, let me tell you another point. We have companies that when I got on board, I went down and visited them. There's 2 of them I can think of. And they were, 70% of their business was overseas. One was a candy company, and they shipped more to Japan than any place else. Their biggest customer here was Disneyland, where they made the balls, the candy balls, the little bitty balls, pastel balls for Space Mountain. But Peru and Bolivia and 2 or 3 others, the kids there in Japan love this stuff, and all sorts of weird stuff. They were going into these countries, they didn't know anybody. We were able to do the due diligence. We identified these people. Today, the candy company still uses us when they go into a new market. But in Japan now, they have got people, and they're dealing with 2 or 3 companies. They don't need us anymore. They're in that market, they know that market. Same in most of, but they're still using us somewhat, in some of South America. It just depends. We've got a company that produce pet supplies. They started in their garage. And when I visited them, they were exporting, it's high-end pet supplies. It's the highest end you can get. You can buy $1.50 vitamins for your dog. You can also buy at Walmart a $14 bottle of oil. It's this company now. I visited the company, and a year later, every day, 2 Amazon trucks, a Walmart truck came up, and they were expanding, and they went into the smallest county, the poorest county in North Carolina, and they established 280 new jobs where the unemployment was over 30%. And the 2 congressmen, thank goodness, there were 2 congressmen divided that little county, and one of them went from against EXIM to for EXIM.
So here,
They don't use us anymore.
yeah, well, let's create some more of those. So as you're talking, and I'm looking around the room now, we have some really savvy companies here that have done a lot. Of course, when we talk Ukraine, I look right at RDO thinking, whether, they used to have a lot of trucks in Ukraine at a store that are now being used by somebody. But anyway, but we're going to get back there, right? It'll all be okay again. Troy, I'm hopeful. Anyway, but companies that they've been very savvy and have done a lot of exporting as well as setting up businesses in other parts of the world. Mike, of course, with an international company, was started in North Dakota, now a global company, Doosan. But I'm looking over at Deneen thinking, okay, tell us the stone mill story, and let's imagine the potential if we could have everything we wanted and every part of the world was our customer base, or at least our potential customer base. We did not rehearse this, did we, Deneen?
We did not, no. So Stone Mill was started by my father, so I'm second generation. And it was started with a need, for a market for a simple farmer who was looking for a market for his crops, looking to diversify his crop base for many reasons. Ultimately created the company, and he did start on exporting. He started with garbanzo beans, which were not real popular yet in the United States at the time. So he did rely a lot on exporting, used the EXIM bank quite a lot when it was available later on. We used it. Right now, some of our bigger hurdles are getting containers in the middle of North Dakota,
Oh, yeah.
but that's another subject.
Yeah.
But yeah, whenever we do export, we're a small company. We can't take the risk of, and all these customers are usually coming to you blind. You don't know them. You don't know friends of theirs. You don't know anything about them. And so utilizing that insurance policy is really the only way I will do business in an export environment. Otherwise, we're just not able to compete and take on that risk. Commodities are already risky,
Right.
highly risky, and so then to not get paid on top of it is obviously not a great way to do business. So it is a important. I don't know. I feel like it's very, very important for small businesses, especially. I know there's a lot of big businesses that use it as well, from the sounds of it. But right, we just wouldn't be able to compete at all otherwise. So.
You raised another interesting point. I mean, the container issue, which we're all very familiar with, and we have a broken supply chain, for sure. But the only way to even be in the game would be to know you had some financing
Right.
to get one of those containers off wherever it is, and they're in weird places. For the most part, one of the bigger challenges is
Yeah.
that in Asia, it's become more profitable to just turn them around empty than it has been to fill them with our products and get them back. So we've got a lot of political issues we're working on there. Okay, so again, value
Can I
added.
ask her,
Yeah, please.
Do you use short-term credit, do you use our credit guarantee insurance?
Yeah, whenever we do any exporting, we use the insurance for new customers, yeah. And like they said, you can wean yourself off of that once you get to know your customer,
Yeah,
but,
and we want to hear through your senator. A lot of times, we don't. People don't, for some reason, utilize their congressman. You don't have to call us, call them. Maybe somebody that's going to get after me for this, but I'm a former congressman, so, I'll call them, tell them what you need. They'll call me, and I'll find out if it's something we can do. One mistake companies make, I say it's a mistake, they use letters of credit. And our short-term credit and our short-term insurance guarantee payment is cheaper. And other countries supply that for their exporters. And if they didn't, this is another example, we could say, well, our competitors don't have that advantage. But it works better, and we can do a lot of due diligence.
Okay, so we have, with the remaining time, here's what I want to do. I want to just open the floor now because I'm hoping that somebody has either a question, or has some curiosity they want satisfied about the program. We have some community bankers in the room. We have Bank of North Dakota in the room, which provides, it's almost an unfair advantage in some respects, but we like it that way, in terms of expertise in a lot of arenas that, we wouldn't have but for that. So let me just open the floor to anybody that's got a question, comment, thought, story. And if not, I'll put somebody else on the line, on the hook. Yes, Roger.
Roger is my name, Roger Gracious. I own a company in North Dakota, carried to North Dakota, Healthy Oilseeds. We do processing of specialty oilseeds. And we had some problem. We were using EXIM Bank, very happy with EXIM Bank. And then at the time, it was thought, not thought to be, but was accused of, EXIM Bank was accused of being subsidizing, like you mentioned, Boeing. And so it was defunded for a while, is that right?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what Senator Kramer led the charge. And I'm here, but I would say this anywhere. He led the charge to get it reauthorized for a record number. And let me go back and say something else about that. Do you know one other thing they used us against Bank of Boeing? They said Ronald Reagan tried to shut EXIM Bank down. You've heard that.
Oh, yeah.
Ronald Reagan, when he was running as governor of California, he said there's several government agencies I don't think we need. And I think he was right about one or two of them. But one of them was EXIM. There were 7 of them. He shut down 4 of the programs. He said 2 years into office, I was wrong about EXIM. I've heard from a lot of, I didn't realize, he said, I was governor of California. I didn't realize how many California companies relied on EXIM. He doubled the funding for EXIM while he was president. That does not stop people from telling that story.
Yeah. Roger, do you have more to your story? Because
No, wait.
Just a little bit if you have time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and go back and ask it again, because when you were talking, it's reauthorized for 10 years. Now, let me tell you, that also helped us with several projects. We are financing, it was Anadarko, but they were bought. But we're financing the largest gas find in the last 40 years off the coast of Mozambique. And it will be supplied with 80% U.S. equipment. And the ISIS attacked it. Y'all may have heard about a year ago where they attacked a project and killed a bunch of people. That was our contractors, and that's part of that was the government was not working with the local people, the federal government, and they were but we're back on track on that. And that's it'll be the largest gas fine. It'll be the largest ever, other than Kuwait. And it'll be all American goods from now on. And we'll have control over where it goes. So it'll go, though, and it's the environmentalists were after us about it. And all of a sudden, the people in Mozambique and 2 or 3 other countries said, wait a minute, it's going to electrify. We're going to have rural electrification in these countries. And all of a sudden, the environmentalists had to choose between elevating people out of poverty like it did here in the 30s when you got rural, and choosing between that and being an environmentalist. And we're going forward with that.
All right, Roger, finish your thought, because I'm anxious to hear.
When EXIM Bank was defunded, we had a fair amount of money owed to us through a Korean company. And we're a very small company, family-owned company, and they owed us about $175,000. And for us, that's quite a bit of money. Maybe
How much?
Some of you, it isn't. $175,000.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
And because of that, then there was a private agency that came out that said, this is flax products we were shipping over there. Flax oil and some flax protein, milled flax. But a government agency came out and said that flax had something about it that they said was not good for a person, was toxic. And so then flax market dropped very quickly in the country of South Korea. Because of that, this company kind of didn't have a market, and so we ended up being out $175,000 during defunding.
Where did your product go?
The product was over there already.
Did you recover the product?
We did not recover the product.
So that's what you lost, the product and the
Didn't get
money.
paid.
Yes.
170.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this. You had insurance? Is it insurance?
We had EXIM Bank, yeah. Yes.
Okay, yeah. You had an insurance broker?
Yes, we did.
Okay. There have been problems, and I don't know your situation. I can tell you just some generalities. Dennis, is now supervising a fourth of the insurance brokers. We're looking at those brokers. We're trying to educate them. There are mistakes that they make that we make clear to the exporter and to the insurance brokers. You got to do this. You got to supply us with the right information. And we're trying to prevent, I don't know, that may not be, I may be totally wrong, but did you have I'm not supposed to talk about individual deals, but did you have an insurance broker involved?
Yes, Trade Acceptance Group.
Okay, all right.
And I'm not criticizing them, or I'm not criticizing EXIM Bank, but I'm just saying that when you talk about, when there's claims of subsidies towards
Yeah.
big business,
Yeah.
well, we're a very small business, and it helped us out a lot. And I just want to say that we're a small company and helped us out, so.
What year was that?
I would say that it was probably 10 years ago. Joanne, worked with Joanne and some on this. 8 years ago. Okay, it was 8 years ago. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, this is a great
I will not-
illustration, though, of the cost of the lapse, right? The cost of political intervention and imposition in something that should never have happened. And I might add, by the way, on behalf of all the mean-spirited right-wing capitalist pig ogres, friends of mine, the Export-Import Bank makes money, right? I mean,
$9 billion.
It's a profit center for the taxpayer.
And they want to change our accounting to a different system, but we're the only agency in the federal government they want to change that system to. If they did all the other agencies, and I went up the hill and one of the, I guess, I don't know, it was Jeb or somebody, I think it was actually Ted Cruz.
Oh my gosh, can't be.
I think he said, we want to change it to this kind of accounting. I said, well, you have to change the law. He said, no, we don't. I said, well, yeah, the Budget Act says this is what all federal agencies. And I said, you wouldn't just do that to EXIM, would you? And then I had somebody I said, have you talked to the Port Authority in Houston lately? That's the last I heard from him. But I don't think it'll stop him. I mean,
I don't know. That one of the challenges of being the only member of the United States Senate that doesn't want to be president, I can't understand what's in their minds. So anyway, Hovind tells me he doesn't want to be president either. So there's only 98 of them that want to be president.
you just hit on
Or
it.
at least think they should be.
Yeah, it's
Right.
funding.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that illustration, by the way. I do wish we could get your $175,000 back, though. Maybe.
Roger, anytime we fail and you lose money,
Call Hovind.
it's a loss for us. No, it's a loss for us.
Thank you.
And we don't, we hate to hear that. Sometimes, and there have been cases since I've been on one, we couldn't legally, there was nothing we could do.
Yeah. That's happening. All right. Who else? Thank you. That was a great illustration. Important. Other thoughts, questions? Yes, Todd, I thought maybe. Weigh in.
Director, thank you for coming. Senator, thanks for having us. So I'm learning a lot. Director, just so you know, I'm president of the Bank of North Dakota. We're the only state-owned bank in the nation, which gives us some flexibility. We're a banker's bank. All our services have to have a lead lender involved, and so I've got a lot of my friends around the table here. But we did develop a program a few years ago called the Ag Commodity Export Enhancement Program that is specifically for ag commodity enhancements. And so what we're trying to make sure is that we don't duplicate what's already available. If there's a way that we can help and enhance, and basically what that product does is for ag producers that are exporting ag commodities. We would be involved with a lead lender to provide the financing, work with EXIM Bank to make sure the insurance is in place, and then and that's our collateral against the loan and those sorts of things. So what I will do from my standpoint is we'll get with Juan and Dennis and sit down and make sure we're all on the same page. And again, we're always looking for, are there other programs we can develop? This is for ag commodity exporters. If there's a need, do we need to develop another program that's for other exporters? And I think that's the things that we'll take into consideration and see if we can't work together to come up with some other things.
And if we can develop something with y'all like that, we could then do it with other, of course, you're the only, you said state-owned bank, which is unusual. I didn't know that, and I'm here chairman of the banking committee. But I do now remember that I had heard one time that there was some strange animal up here prowling around. But, which is obviously worked out well.
For 103 years.
And, you're interfering with the free market.
That's what
we would argue. I'll leave that to my banking friends to let you know if we're interfering or not.
We partner with banks. We partner with insurance brokers. We don't, and they want us. I'm going to get Jim Burris to call you.
Okay.
And he's a banker, and he's acting. Well, he's no longer the acting chairman, but he was for a while. And I will say this, the Biden administration had the foresight to put a banking guy into that position, and we've got a lot of those. But I'm going to get him to call you. And let me close by saying an impression I've gotten here. When I tour these companies, this company is family friendly. And that's true of a lot of homegrown companies. And when I was out there on the floor and I was talking to people, and you were talking about flexible hours, and this he's a farmer, but he comes in here and works 3 days a week. Because I got uncles that are farmers in Alberta, Canada. And they're bad years. And sometimes you gotta you got to have a good paying job to support the farm. But a lot of them said to me, my daughter is going to Dickinson State. I don't know where, I guess that's here.
That's right here, right here. There's the president sitting right there.
Okay, good. Yeah. And where did you go? I went to Dickinson State. I got this degree. You know, I went to North Dakota. I've got a degree from North Dakota. Or my child's, or my husband's gone, my wife's gone back to get a teaching certificate. You can't, when you talk about EXIM value added or Killdeer, it's not just salary. I mean, it's raised the income, good paying jobs raise the educational level. And that'll pay dividends for generations to come. And, now, there are a lot of times we're now questioning what kind of education. I mean, I've got a son with a political science degree. He's
Overrated.
He can wait. He waits on tables, but anyway.
I would submit to you, Spencer, that it raises, income levels. But I think it raises the gaze. To me, that's what's exciting, is that community bankers become export bankers. The community bankers suddenly have more assets to lend to entrepreneurs. That entrepreneurs have a vision, this big, and it goes to this big. And a John Deere dealership ends up with a store in Ukraine, or you name it. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities. Now, I would say this about getting out to a place like this. I love it because inevitably the expectation is exceeded. The creativity, the risk taking. I mean, these prairies were not settled by wimps. The wimps all went to South Dakota, or someplace.
Oh, they went to New York. They stayed in New York City.
That's certain.
Or Europe. They stayed in Europe.
Well, there's a reason that if you drive around here, you'll see Ukrainian crosses in the cemeteries, because those are the people that came out here, and it's really quite remarkable. So that's why a 103-year-old institution like the Bank of North Dakota, that I think the critics have basically given up, because the Bank of North Dakota, like EXIM, doesn't initiate loans; they participate in loans. They add value to the other institutions but for the Bank of North Dakota, they wouldn't have the expertise available to them, or at least not as well coordinated. And that's true, by the way, of the federal. That's SBA. That's USDA Rural Development. That's all of the various players in the entire value chain, the financial services value chain, come together at one hub, and that's the Bank of North Dakota. And I will tell you this: when I was negotiating like a madman for a reasonable PPP program during the CARES Act, I had no less than 3 or 4 roundtables, virtual roundtables, with no less than 400 bankers at one time, because the Bank of North Dakota provided that opportunity for me. Right up until an hour before we passed the bill, we were still editing it and still modifying it to make sure it met what our local bankers needed. Now, I'm not smart enough. You served with Sonny Bono. He was on the Judiciary Committee, so it's not that bad an idea that I'd be on the Banking Committee.
I'm a better skier than he is.
Yeah, that's for darn sure. But so, my point being, but we have this resource. We have these resources. When I have a question about local lending, I go have coffee with Dale, because he'll give me at least 2 cups, when I go to Dakota Community and stop in. And we have an advantage in this type of access, and the bank helps coordinate that. So, yeah, if you guys come up with another industry level that needs a little assistance, they'll create the program that allows you to leverage EXIM. Okay, we're at the end of our time, but I cheat a lot on that sort of thing. I'm a senator. and
Well, can
we
I,
filibuster. So,
let me tell you
Yeah.
that my, people ask me if I've been to North Dakota before, and my mother used to go up home in Grand Prairie in Alberta once every year or two, and I'd spend a month. And the train would come out of Chicago, and it would exit the United States in Portal. And that's where they get on and inspect everything.
yep, that's
And,
right.
but the train stopped in a town called Minot. Minot, that was Minot. And I got a Coca-Cola. It stopped for long enough for me to get a Coca-Cola. So I'm very impressed with Minot.
It's all a matter of the time of year. I will tell you. I'll tell you one more that you don't remember. It might make a chapter, right after the Easton chapter, in the memoirs. Frank Keating, remember Frank Keating? He was the former governor of Oklahoma. He was governor at the time of the Oklahoma City bombing.
I went with them all over Idaho and Montana.
You made it to Fargo.
Yeah.
So Frank Keating and Sam Brownback.
But I was on that trip, and you didn't remember me.
I do remember you.
Oh, okay.
And you were on that trip, and here's what you were doing in Fargo that day that I joined you. I was a young public service commissioner, Robert Young, public service commissioner, and they were there testifying to the conservative bona fides of one United States senator who thought he should be president. Do you remember that? You were there for John McCain. They were stumping for John
That's
McCain.
right, it was John
It was in February of 2008. It was a quick trip, but we held a little news conference.
I
Got our
was,
pictures in the Fargo
yeah,
Forum,
yeah.
all the big things.
I was a good friend of John's and
Yeah.
great guy. I supported a lot of losers. I got a track record.
Me too, but I lost 3 times before I ended up at this dumb job. So hang in there. All right, you guys. Again, appreciate so much this gift of your time, your thoughts. We'll hang around a little bit. I think we're going to talk to some reporters if there are any here. I don't know if there are. Not. So that means we have a little extra time.
Rachel says there aren't any.
Okay.
I want to introduce Courtney Bush. Courtney, this is her first trip
Stand up, Courtney.
she's just joined the bank a month ago, or 2, right?
Almost
Almost a year. Well, so I'm sorry.
time does.
She's first
fly.
trip with me, and so it's Courtney Bush. And when we hired her, I said, "Well, it's always good to be friends with the Bushes."
Yeah.
So, but you've done a real good job on this trip. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Courtney.
And Rachel, I called Rachel about a week ago, and I emailed her, and I asked her to call me, and I'm kind of used to the next day. I put the phone down, and it started ringing. And I looked, and it was Washington. I said, this is not going to be Rachel. It was Rachel. That's how quick she did it. So you got some good people.
I know. Believe me. I've got the best. All right. Anybody else? Quickly, story, thought, question, curiosity? How can TMI sell more to Canada? I don't know. I don't know, Dean. Anybody?
I want to give a shout out to Kyle. Good to see you here.
Oh, yeah.
That's been very helpful with Dakota Bank, and then we've also certainly worked very much with the Bank of North Dakota. So just got a good team here and a lot of good folks. I'm very grateful.
Where would we be without our bankers, right?
Well, thank you, Senator and Director Bacchus, for coming out here. I mean, this has, been great to get everybody together, and we have so many great stories to tell. I mean, every one of these companies that sit here, they started very small. You look over at Steffes Corporation over there. At one point, they were making church furniture, and I used to mow Paul Steffes's grass. It was uphill both ways, mowing his grass. And where they've taken that company, you look at Baker Boy, where they've taken that company, where they started off as a very small little corporation. You know, TMI, how they started and how they developed into what they are. Killdeer Mountain Manufacturing, starting up in Killdeer, moving to multiple communities in the southwest part of the North Dakota, and how they've expanded and the quality of work that they do, that they just get award after award. We're just so proud of all our manufacturing base out here in Dickinson. We have these great banking institutions. We have these great community organizations that are out here and serving, you know, all these workers, and we're continuing to work on quality of life in Dickinson. I mean, we're excited what we have going on. We have a brand new sports complex coming. We're, you know, we have our new hospital in town and big clinic, and we're working, you know, every day to improve the quality of life out here, so we can continue to attract workers to these manufacturers and these small businesses, and to include to get, like you said, Director Bacchus, get those teachers to move here, because they're the first impression that many of our children, that it lasts a lifetime if they stay in our systems, that you be at either the public school, which is, we have one of the best public schools in the state, if not in the nation. We have a great parochial school system here and private school system. And then they, you know, follow that up all the way through into Dickinson State University. Now we're developing a CTE out here, a partnership between the city, Dickinson State, and the, you know, private and public school system to develop that new technical, like you were talking about, degree-wise. What would he see in the future? And that's what we're doing, the partnership with the manufacturers here in town to co-op to what are the jobs that we need, that this new enterprise that we have with this CTE, we're putting people out in a couple of years into the workforce. And then we have that, you know, of course we have just the Bakken, which has done so much, not only for Western North Dakota, the whole state, and I would say even the whole nation. When the Bakken came into play in 2009, it probably saved the economy.
Well, I used to represent two railroads, and not here, but Matt Rose was a friend of mine. And
We know Matt well.
I can tell you that great guy, came up through the ranks.
And yes, he did.
But the sand and the oil and it was good for the railroads.
Well, in 2000
and coal.
Yep. And when 2008, when that, you know, that major catastrophe in the economy hit, and we were flush with, everybody came to Western North Dakota to look for a job. Overnight, we were full of people, and we took care of them out here. We did our best to accommodate and get individuals into the workforce and find them housing and accommodate through the school system. But like I said, this part of the country, as you said, Senator, is not for the weak. It will test you, and our ancestors were they proved it, and they came from the Ukraine, and they were the Germans from Russia, which is the Ukraine, and they came here, and the Swedes and the Norwegians, and they all came here and settled this part of the world, and there was nothing out here when they settled, and look what they've turned this part of the world into. And you go across the whole state of North Dakota. I mean, all these small entrepreneurs that turn these companies into major companies that are players across the United States. And we're very thankful that you came out here, Senator, brought Director Bacchus out, and you're welcome anytime. Come out anytime.
I always feel welcome here. That's
Well,
for sure.
when I go visit my cousin Leroy Erickson, I'll ask him what country he's from.
There you
But
go.
This is a wide open spaces out
It
here.
is.
I used to go skiing every year at Breckenridge with my boys, and the first year I went, I looked on the map and I stopped in St. Louis the first night, and I thought I was halfway there. And the next day, I got through Missouri, and like 3.5 hours, and I said, we'll be there by nightfall, and I'm still in Kansas. I mean, I got to Breckenridge at 4 in the morning, so I'm glad y'all have 75 miles an hour
Yeah.
speed.
It is wide open out here. When I was stationed at Fort Benning, one of my best friends was from Seal, Alabama.
Perfect.
Seal, Alabama?
Shit.
Seal, the little
Oh, yeah,
town right
Seal,
outside of
Seal, yeah.
Seal. And I brought him up here,
Yeah.
and for like you said, and he flew in at night. And you know how Alabama's full of trees, and they say Auburn's out on the prairie, right? Well, he saw what prairie was when it was the middle of the night, and he landed here, and the next day we ended up in the Badlands, and the sun came up out in the Badlands, and he just looked for miles, and he said, I cannot believe this up here. And he just loved it. And I think anybody that comes up and tours western North Dakota, just North Dakota as a whole, just loves this part of the country because
Beautiful
yes.
sunsets.
Oh, sunsets, sunrises.
Yeah.
You got to be on Lake Sakakawea at 5 a.m. trying to catch some eyes when the sun comes up. There's nothing better.
Thank you all. Thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
Thank you
Thank
all
you, Senator.
for joining us today. I will say one additional thing about KMM I'll never be the same. In addition to the banking committee, I serve in the Armed Services Committee. And the fact, and Spencer references, the fact that every time you get on a Boeing, on a commercial flight, you know that you're on a KMM supported airplane. But when you see an F-15 screaming through the sky in defense of freedom around the world, I was just down in Skunk Works a couple months ago looking at some Black Ops aircraft, some that will be coming to North Dakota, some that will go other places. And knowing that people here are making sure that airplane's going to stay in the sky to protect us, that's another level of importance to the concept of making them in America. Every piece, every component, every bit of the supply chain. So we've got work to do, but if we're going to cut off China, we've got to build a bigger floor, Kristen, and we got to find more people to work, because to me we've got to be all about that.
You know, I've been to China 5 times. They are the kindest people in the world. They are, they're gracious. I love the Chinese people. Leadership. They have horrible leadership. It's the Communist Party, you know.
It is.
And, you know, that's what the people in Hong Kong or Taiwan will tell you. They're Chinese, but they're not that kind.
Thank you all.